had seen this simple model for a conjugated system. The simple model was that you have a particle which is moving in one dimension in L, and it is confined to a region of length L. But now suppose I have a piece of metal, let us say I have a piece of metal which is nicely shaped, something like that. And just to make things simple, I will say that okay, this piece of metal is having the shape of a box, rectangular box, so to say, and I can say okay, the sides of the box are L1, I will call this side L1, this side L2, and that side L3. You know that in a metal there are conduction electrons, and just the way an electron in a conjugated system can move from one end to the other end, the conduction electrons in this piece of metal can move anywhere within this piece of metal. And so, the simplest approximation that you can have for these electrons is to say that they are free to anywhere within this 3-dimensional box, right. If they are inside the metal, then of course, their potential energy is low. If they are inside this piece of metal, then potential energy is low, while outside the potential energy is large. So, therefore, we can say that I have a situation where I have a particle. I mean, there are of course, a large number of electrons in the metal, but we are only going to look at one electron. In fact, this involves so many approximations. So, one, if you think of one electron, that electron actually interacts with the other electrons, and it also interacts with the nuclei. So, therefore, the potential is actually quite complex, but we imagine that we are not worried about any of these things. We will just say that if the electron is within this rectangular box, its potential energy may be taken to be a constant everywhere, and that constant it is convenient to take it to be equal to 0. While if the electron comes out, then you see it does not feel the presence of the nuclei, because it is outside the piece of metal, and its potential energy is very large. And again, as before, we will take it to be infinitely large. So, let us have a coordinate system. Okay. So, this is my coordinate system. This will be my x axis, this will be my y axis, and that will be my z axis. And let me put that piece of metal here in such a fashion that it would occupy this region. So, this is the piece of metal, and as I said, the sides are L1, that means this length is L1, this side is L2, and the height of the box is L3. Now, normally when you think of a piece of metal, it is macroscopic in size, its size is maybe 2 centimeters, 4 centimeters, whatever you want. But these days you know that people have lots of interest in nanotechnology, and it is actually possible to make very tiny small pieces of metals, I mean nanoparticles. Okay. And so, you can have even very small sized particles, their shape may not be exactly this kind of shape, but maybe this is something like a sphere or some other shape. So, this is actually, even though it is a simple model, it can have applications in even in nanotechnology. And now what do I say? I say that I have a particle moving in 3 dimensions. So, naturally I am going to find out the solutions of the Schrodinger equation. So, I should write the Hamiltonian for the system, because a particular electron in this piece of metal can move anywhere in the inside it. It is actually moving in 3 directions. So, therefore, what is going to happen is the Hamiltonian will have definitely contribution from the potential energy minus h cross square by, another mistake, contribution from the kinetic energy, which will be minus h cross square by 2 m, into you will have dou square upon dou x square. This comes from motion in the x direction, dou square upon dou y square coming from motion in the y direction, and dou square upon dou z square coming from motion in the z direction. And in addition, what should I do? I will have a potential V of x y z. But I have already told you what the potential is going to be. If the particle is inside the box, V will be taken to be equal to 0. So, let me write it here, V x y z is equal to 0 when the particle is inside the box. So, what does it mean as far as x, y and z are concerned? Well, you look at the coordinate system, you see your box extends, you see this point is the origin that has x equal to 0, and if you move along this direction, this is the point with x is equal to L1. So, if the particle is within the box, its x coordinate has to be between 0 and L1. What about its y coordinate if the particle is within the box? In a similar fashion, its y coordinate has to be between 0 and L2, its z coordinate has to be between 0 and L3, correct. Even if one of these conditions is not satisfied, then the particle is outside the box, right. And therefore, I say okay, if all these conditions are satisfied, the potential energy is 0, otherwise it is equal to infinity. So, now I want to solve the Schrodinger equation. Of course, I should actually write down the time dependent Schrodinger equation, but it is not necessary for us to analyze that, because we have already done this analysis earlier. But just for the sake of completeness, let me write it here. Psi will be a function of x, y, z, and in addition to that, it will depend upon time, and that is equal to that Hamiltonian which is written there, too long to write. So, let me just write h operating upon psi x, y, z and t. So, this is the equation that we are basically interested in, but then you can say okay, this capital psi x, y, z t may be separated as a product of two functions. The first one depending only upon the spatial coordinates, and the second part we know what it is e to the power of minus I e t by h cross. Here psi will depend upon x, y, z, all the position coordinates. So, this is what it is. Okay. this kind of thing we have already analyzed. And so, how will you determine this psi? The answer is that you have to look at the simpler equation, the time independent Schrodinger equation, which says that H psi must be equal to E psi. So, if you can find the solutions of this equation, which essentially means that you have to find the eigenvalues of the Hamiltonian operator and the corresponding eigenfunctions. So, if we can find these things, then any given eigenfunction of the Hamiltonian operator may be put in here and you will get a solution of the time dependent Schrodinger equation. That is what we have learned till now. So, therefore, we will worry about this equation H psi is equal to E psi and we want to solve it. So, let us look at this equation, but then the moment you look at this equation you realize that it is a partial differential equation, and partial differential equations are difficult to solve. So, what we are going to do is we are going to use the method that we have already used, the method of separation of variables. That is the method that we are going to use. But before I do that, I want to point out something to you. The potential as it is defined, V of x by z. What I am going to do is I am going to claim that it may be written as some V1 of x plus some V2 of y plus another V3 of z. Okay. I am going to claim that it may be written like this, where I will define V1 of x to be equal to 0 if x is between 0 and L1, right. Look at what I am doing. You see, I have defined V1 of x to be like this, so that if the particle's x coordinate is outside these limits, what should I do? I will say that V1 of x is infinity, right. So, if the x coordinate is in these limits, then potential V1 of x will be 0, while if the x coordinate is outside this range, the potential V1 of x will be infinity. Similarly, how will I define V2 of x? No, not V2 of x, but V2 of y. It will be defined to be 0 if y is between 0 and L2, and it will be equal to infinity otherwise. And V3 of z will again be defined to be 0 if 0 less than z, less than L3 and equal to infinity otherwise. So, all that I am saying is that the original potential may be written as if it is a sum of 3 separate terms which are defined like this. Suppose the particle happens to be inside the box, then what will happen? X will be between these limits and V1 will be 0, y will be between these limits, V2 will be 0, and z will be between these limits and V3 will be 0. So, that the potential will be actually 0, correct. But suppose the particle is outside the box, then at least one of these variables x, y or z will not satisfy this condition, and then what will happen? The corresponding V will be infinity, right. I mean, just to illustrate, suppose I say okay, x is not in this range, but y and z are in that range, then what will happen? V2 and V3 will be 0, but V1 will be infinity, and therefore, the net answer that you are going to get for the total potential will be infinity. So, therefore, it is possible for me to write the potential in this rather simple fashion, and that is very useful, because See, I mean the potential has been separated into 3 separate terms. The potential is written as if it is sum of 3 separate terms. One depending only upon x, the other depending only on y, and the third depending only on z. Now, what we will do is we will take our psi, which is a function of x, y, z, and try to find a solution which will be written as capital X into capital Y into capital Z. I hope you will not confuse between that capital X and this capital X. This is just labeling the coordinates, while this is a function, the capital X is a function and it is going to be a function of small x alone, capital Y will be assumed to be a function of small y alone, and capital Z will be assumed to be a function of small z alone. So, essentially we are using the method of separation of variables. I have a function psi which depends upon x, y, z. I assume that it may be written as a product of 3 separate functions, each one depending only on one variable. As I told you earlier, this is a policy of divide and conquer. Now, what is it that I want to do? I want to determine capital X, capital Y and capital Z in such a fashion that the product satisfies the equation. Okay. So, let me take this product and substitute that into this equation. So, the equation actually is minus h cross square by 2 m that is your kinetic energy part, then you have V 1 of x plus V 2 of y plus V 3 of z. Operating upon capital X of x, capital Y of y, capital Z of z, and the answer must be equal to capital E into capital X of x, capital Y of y, capital Z of z. Now, if you look at dou square upon dou x square, you see you are going to, it is going to operate upon this product, but in that product only capital X depends upon small x, capital Y and capital Z does not depend upon small x. So, therefore, this operator is going to affect only the first part of this function of this product, while second derivative with respect to y, it is going to affect only that, and second derivative with respect to z is going to affect only the last term capital Z, right. So, therefore, let us rewrite this equation. So, you are going to get minus h cross square by 2 m dou square upon dou x square operating upon capital X of x. Just writing the term arising from here, it will be that, and then of course, you have capital Y and capital Z, but they are unaffected. So, I will put them here, capital Y of y, capital Z of z. So, this term is actually giving me that. then there is also a term V1 of x multiplying capital X, capital Y, capital Z. Let me just write that term also. V1 of x multiplying capital X of x, but that also would have, I mean V1 of x is multiplying all the three. So, therefore, I would have capital Y of y, capital Z of Z. So, this term is coming from this one, right. If that is the way it is, then I can write the term coming from y. What is it going to be? Minus h cross square by 2m capital X of x, capital Z of Z, dou square capital Y of y by dou y square plus x of x, Z of Z, V2y capital Y of y, correct. It is similar, except that here you are concerned with dou square upon dou y square. Well, I will need this, so let me keep it somewhere. Psi of x y z is equal to capital X into capital Y into capital Z. And then the next term is going to be minus h cross square by 2m. You will have dou square upon dou Z square operating upon capital Z of Z multiplied by x of x, y of y plus x of x, y of y, V3 Z capital Z of Z. And this whole thing must be equal to the right hand side, which actually is equal to E capital X of x, capital Y of y, capital Z of Z. Right. Now, I should also tell you that it is really not necessary to use partial derivative notation in here, because capital X actually depends only upon small x, there is no other variable to be kept constant. So, therefore, if you like, you can write this as d square x by dx square. Now, having seen this, I want to simplify this. It looks quite messy. So, what I am going to do is I am going to divide throughout by this expression, divide throughout by that, and then what will be the answer? Well, on the right hand side I am going to get E. If you look at this term, right, or these two terms, what will happen? You see, I am dividing throughout by capital X into capital Y into capital Z. So, this capital Y and capital Z will go away, but I will have a 1 by capital X sitting here. And so, well, here again, here actually it is simple, everything capital X, capital Y and capital Z will go off. So, therefore, let me write just those two terms. You are going to have minus h cross square divided by 2m 1 by capital X of x d square capital X of x divided by dx square, that is coming from this one, plus the next term actually happens to be V1 of x, right. That is all that you have from the first two terms. So, similarly, from the second two terms you are going to get minus h cross square upon 2m, very easy to write this actually, simple. Well, that is equal to E. So, this is the result, but then if you look at this result, you notice something interesting. If you look at this part, these two terms, what do you find? They depend upon x. Well, if you look at these two, they depend only upon y, and if you look at those two, they depend only upon z, and if you added the three together, the answer is going to be a constant, correct. Now, if I want, actually I can take these two terms to the other side, and then what will you have? On the left hand side you will have something which depends only upon x, on the right hand side you have something which depends upon y and z, but remember x, y and z are independent variables, and therefore, what is the conclusion? There is something that is occurring on the left, which will be this term, right. It is equal to a function of y and z. If such an equation is to be satisfied, this term must be a constant. This is the method of separation of variables. If you have an equation which says that a function of x alone is equal to a function of y and z, then that function of x alone should be equal to a constant, and the other part also should be equal to a constant. So, therefore, what is the conclusion? The conclusion is that this must be equal to a constant, and I am going to call this constant E1. This must be equal to a constant, but then if you are taking these two terms to the other side and arguing this, then I mean, why should I take those two terms? I could have taken this and that also to the other side and repeated the argument, and it would imply that this also must be equal to a constant, and therefore, this is equal to some E2. And the third one also must in a similar fashion be equal to a constant, which you will call E3. And further, these constants must be such that E1 plus E2 plus E3 must be equal to the total energy of the system. That is how it should be. So, look at what has happened. You see, I had a partial differential equation involving three variables, but now I have three separate equations, right. What are the three separate equations? This must be equal to a constant which I call E1, this must be equal to another constant E2, and this must be equal to a third constant E3, and the sum of these three constants must be equal to the total energy of the system. So, let us look at these equations. If you look at the first equation, what does it say? Minus h cross square by 2m capital X of x d square capital X of x by dx square plus V1 of x is equal to E1. That is what this equation says, this equation, correct. But if you want, you can multiply throughout by this capital X of x, and if you multiply it throughout by capital X of x, what will happen? You will get minus h cross square by 2m d square capital X of x by dx square plus V1 of x into capital X of x is equal to E1 capital X of x. So, this is an ordinary differential equation for capital X, which I will try to solve. But before I try to solve it, I want to remind you what V1 of x is. It is there in your notes, but V1 of x is defined to be equal to 0 if x is between 0 and L1, and it is equal to be infinity otherwise. Right. Now, if you look at this equation, what is interesting is to note that it may be written as minus h cross square by 2 m d square upon dx square plus v 1 of x operating upon capital X of x is equal to E 1 x of x, right. This equation, if you like, you can write it in this fashion. You may wonder why I did that. The answer is extremely simple. See, this actually, this operator is what? It is the operator for kinetic energy, and V 1 is a potential energy, and therefore, if you look at this equation, this actually describes particle in a one dimensional box, right. This equation is just the equation for particle in a one dimensional box. The box extends from 0 to L1, the length of the box is L1, and this is a problem that we already have solved, right. So, what is the solution? The solution obviously can be obtained only if the solution can be obtained only if E1 has the value some number n square pi square h cross square divided by 2 m L1 square, right. The length of the box is now L1. So, when you solve this equation, what you are going to get is a quantum number, right, and that quantum number cannot have the value 0, but it can have the values 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. And what will be the corresponding wave function capital X of x? We know that it is going to be square root of 2 by L1 sin n pi x by L1. I will change my notation a little bit, because you see this is associated. I have solved only the first equation. Similarly, I have to worry about the second equation, the third equation. Because this quantum number has arisen out of the solution of the first equation, I will not call it n, but I will call it n1. Okay. And what about n1? N1 can take the values 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. It cannot take the value 0. Similarly, if you rewrote this equation and solved it, you are going to get another quantum number which will be n2, which will take the values 1, 2, 3, etc. and you will find that E2 must be n2 square pi square h cross square divided by 2 m L2 square, right. The length of the box in that case is different, and capital Y of y will be given by square root of 2 by L2 sin n2 pi y divided by L2. And finally, if you think of E3, it is going to be given by n3 square by 2 m L3 square pi square h cross square, and capital Z of Z will be given by square root of 2 by L3 sin So, we have solved the problem completely, right. We have found the eigenvalues of the system, we have also found the eigenfunctions. and in fact these functions we have chosen them to be normalized. That is why this constant square root of 2 by L1 occurs or square root of 2 by L2 occurs. So, what is the complete solution that I have obtained now? The complete solution is actually a product of capital X, capital Y and capital Z. So, I am going to now say that okay, my psi which is a function of x, y and z is the product of these three functions. So, let me multiply those three functions. So, if you multiply these three functions, you see you have a square root of 2 here, square root of 2 here, square root of 2 there. If you combine all of them, you are going to get square root of 8 divided by L1, L2, L3, right, and it is going to be sine n1 pi x by L1 sine n2 pi y by L2 . So, this is the answer, and what is the energy associated with this? It will be the sum of E1 plus E1, E2 and E3. So, you add them up, you will find that the energies are of the form pi square h cross square divided by 2m into n1 square by L1 square. This comes from motion in the x direction actually, then plus n2 square by L2 square plus n3 square by L3 square. And also it is obvious that the wave function depends upon three quantum numbers n1, n2 and n3. So, I am going to put n1, n2, n3 here, and the energy also depends upon exactly these three numbers. So, E is a function of, or E is dependent upon n1, n2, n3. Okay. What is the lowest possible state of the system? It is clear that you will get that by putting n1 equal to 1, n2 equal to 1 and n3 equal to 1, correct. Well, what I will do is I will confine myself at least for a few minutes at least to a situation where the box is actually having the shape of a cube. If it has the shape of a cube, what will happen? L1 is equal to L2 and that is equal to L3, and so I will have pi square h cross square by 2m n1 square plus n2 square plus n3 square divided by capital L square, where capital L is equal to L1 equal to L2 equal to L3. So, this will be the energy of the system. So, the lowest possible state happens when n1 is equal to 1, n2 is equal to 1, n3 is equal to 1. So, in fact, any particular state of the system may be specified by specifying the values of these three quantum numbers. If you give me these three quantum numbers, then I can tell you what the wave function is. I can also tell you how much the energy is. So, what I will do is I will write these three numbers within a bracket n1, n2, n3, and that specifies in which state the system is or the particle is. and therefore, the lowest possible state of the system would correspond to having n1 equal to 1, n2 equal to 1 and n3 equal to 1. So, what we will do is we will label the state as 1 1 1, and you can actually calculate the energy of this state. Okay. And you will find that if you put n1 equal to 1, n2 equal to 1, n3 equal to 1, the energy will be given by h cross square pi square into 3 divided by 2 ml square. And then one can ask what will be the energy of the next possible state. To get that, what you would have to do is you will have to put n1 equal to 2, n2 equal to 1, n3 equal to 1. So, such a state I will write as 2 1 1, and the energy of that can be easily calculated. What will you find? You will find that it is given by h cross square pi square divided by 2 m L square into 6. And therefore, I can represent that by a horizontal line. This represents the allowed energy level. But then if you think about it for a minute, you see there is another possible state which may be written as 1 to 1, and if you calculate the energy of that, you will find that it is exactly equal to this energy, and therefore, there is this state also having this exactly the same energy, but not only that, you also have a state like 1 1 2. This also has precisely the same energy, and therefore, one says that this energy level actually has 3 states associated with it, not 1. This one has only one state associated with it, and therefore, we would say that this energy level is non-degenerate, meaning that there is only one state. This energy level we will say it is triply degenerate. There are 3 states, and usually what we do is we indicate that by drawing 3 lines close to each other. Then what would be the next allowed energy level? It is obvious that it would be obtained by putting, let us say, 2 of the quantum numbers equal to 2. So, for example, we can have 2 2 1, then 2 1 2 or 1 2 2. All of them will have precisely the same energy. How much will be the energy? It will be equal to h cross square pi square divided by 2 m L square multiplied by 9, and obviously this energy level also is triply degenerate. As I said, it is indicated by drawing 3 lines very close to each other. The next energy level, you can think about it, you will find that it is actually obtained by putting the quantum numbers equal to 3 1 1 or 1 3 1 or 1 1 3. This also is triply degenerate. The energy will be given by h cross square pi square divided by 2 m L square into 11. And interestingly, the next possible allowed energy level is non-degenerate. It is obtained by putting 2 2 2, and the energy will be h cross square pi square into 12 divided by 2 m L square. Of course, I mean you can go on doing this, you can calculate the energies of the allowed states further, but we will not do that. But the important thing to notice is that the ground state, that is the lowest possible state, is non-degenerate. The next 3 levels are triply degenerate, and the following one is again non-degenerate. Okay, now let us think of the wave function for the lowest possible state. How would the wave function for the lowest possible state look like? Well, this is not a question that is difficult to answer, because For the lowest possible state, you know that you will have n1 equal to 1, n2 equal to 1, n3 equal to 1, right. And this part, see, if n3 is 1, sorry, n1 is 1, you will have sin pi x by L1. It was just the wave function for the particle in a one dimensional box, the ground state wave function for the particle in a one dimensional box, and it has no nodes, right. So, if n1 is 1, this will not give me any nodes, no point where the function is 0. In fact, the maximum will be, the maximum value of this function will be at the middle of the box in one dimension. Similarly, if you are thinking of this one again as a one dimension, as a wave function for a one dimensional box, what is going to happen is that it will be 0 at the two ends and its maximum value will be at the middle, right, at L1 by 2, and this one will have its maximum value at L3 by 2. So, therefore, if you think of the product of all this, where will it have its maximum value? Right at the center of the box. So, therefore, if you wanted to represent this wave function, how will you represent it? Well, the only way in which I can represent this function is to use shading, right. See, the maximum value of the function is right at the center of the box, there it will have the largest value, and then as you go away from the center, what will happen? The function will go on decreasing, eventually at the surface of the box the function will become 0. That is how this function will be. Now, suppose you are thinking of psi psi 1 to 1 x y z. Explicitly written, it is going to be 8 by L1, L2, L3 square root sin pi x by L1. But it is not really necessary to put L1 there, because we are assuming that the box dimensions are all the same. So, instead of L1 actually it will be L sin pi y by L sin pi z by L. I have made a mistake because I have assumed that n2 is equal to 2. So, therefore, I should put a 2 here. Now, as far as this function is concerned, as you vary x from 0 to L, the function always remains positive. This also remains positive, remember, I mean it is the ground state wave function for a one dimensional box. But this one, it is not the ground state wave function for a one dimensional box, but it is the first excited state. The first excited state has a node, and this function will vanish when y is equal to what value? L by 2. When y is equal to L by 2, what will happen? You will have L by 2 here, and so you will have sin pi, and sin pi is actually 0. So, therefore, whenever y is equal to L by 2, this function is going to be equal to 0, right. So, where is y is equal to L by 2? In the box, if you say y is equal to L by 2, where is it that y is equal to L by 2? Well, you think of a plane like this, cutting the box into two halves, right. Imagine this is your rectangular box, this is the y direction. Imagine a plane like this, that anywhere on that plane you know that y is going to be equal to L by 2, right. And on that plane you realize that this wave function has to be 0, and to this side of that plane the wave function you know will be positive. On the plane the function will be 0, that means on the other side the function is going to be negative, and therefore, if I represented this function by shading, how would it look like? Well, I would have a density for the function here, that means the value of the function is large in this region again on the surface of this region, surface of this box, the function has to vanish. On this plane itself, the function will vanish. On this side of the plane, what will happen is that the function will have a value that is going to be negative, right. On the plane it is, I mean, you let me just repeat this. This is the plane, on the plane the function is 0, this is my box. So, on the plane the function is 0, to this side the function is positive, to the other side the function is negative. And therefore, the way to represent this function will be by shading and to say that okay, this is the positive region and that is the negative region. Okay. Now, when you look at this, this actually resembles something that you already know. This resembles one of your atomic orbitals. If you look at this, it resembles one of your atomic orbitals. Which atomic orbital is that? P type atomic orbital. In fact, it resembles Py. Okay. Thank you for listening.